All right. So, as we said last week, we really are at a pivotal point in the NFL offseason as free agency essentially began in earnest today. So, before I get into what I think about Russell Wilson as a player, as obviously we're going to be talking about the Steelers in the first segment today, let's first think about the Steelers and what they've been, not only in recent history, but in their entire history. So, obviously Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. They have a rich history with that dynasty in the 70s. In the last 10 years, they've had the second best regular season record in the league. They're almost like the AFC version of the Dallas Cowboys, a huge brand, a huge fan base following, lots of regular season wins. So we've got that down. We know what the Steelers are, as a franchise, as a team. And although they haven't had that success in the playoffs, I really believe there's three places you can be in the NFL. You either have the star quarterback and you're in win now mode building around them. You're either not necessarily in NFL purgatory, but you're searching for an above average starter at that position, or you're in the third tier where you're either in the business of drafting a young quarterback or just all hands on deck to get one. The Steelers are at the high end of that second tier, if you will, if you really think about it. I mean, there aren't many other places you'd rather be. I would say in the past 10 years, 2/3 to 3/4 of the league would like to take the Steelers' place. Completely relevant franchise. So my point being is that we should really think about Russell Wilson going to the Steelers more so as what can the Steelers do for Russell Wilson as opposed to what can Russell Wilson do for the Steelers, which I think is a ton. And my guess at this point is that they're going to be able to revitalize his career in the perception of him as a player. So now let's get to what Russ can give to the Steelers, what he can provide to the Steelers. So he's going to sign that 1-year deal for $1.2 million. And there's really three ways to look at the deal, and I think they all tie together. So first of all, my evaluation as Russell Wilson as a player. And I am landing somewhere in the middle here. I know that's not a hot take or a popular opinion. People either want to say he's washed or he can still play. He's obviously not in his prime, but I don't think he's anywhere near washed either. After what my eyes told me watching him last season, there are still some things on the football field that he does at a pretty high level. Now, he's pretty accurate, but I would say the criticism of him at this point is that he doesn't necessarily see over the middle of the field that well, and that may be reason to explain why he was second in the NFL in terms of holding the ball for the longest amount of time. So that's got to change during his tenure in Pittsburgh. As I said, still accurate to most parts of the field, and I think he's got something left in the tank in terms of his athletic ability. Now, the difference is obviously perception because it doesn't look the same. It doesn't look the way it looked in Seattle when so much of his game was predicated off of secondary reaction, playmaking, really getting outside of the pocket, scanning the field, and making a throw down the field. He's not exactly capable of doing that on a consistent basis anymore. And then obviously, if you guys have watched the channel a good bit, you can tell that I think coaching is pretty important. And let's just look at Russell Wilson over the past 2 years, for instance, to look towards coaching. 1 year with Nat Hackett calling plays, who is an unproven play caller, didn't look that great. Last year with Sean Payton, now all of a sudden Russell Wilson has 26 touchdowns and only 8 interceptions. So I do like Arthur Smith as offensive coordinator for the Steelers. And I think his style of play can mesh well with Russell Wilson. When you look at Arthur Smith's past, Ryan Tannehill's 2 best seasons as a pro came with Arthur Smith as offensive coordinator in Tennessee. And it didn't even equate in the numbers as well. They had team success. They made it to the AFC Championship in one of those years. And then here's the last thing that ties all of this together. Salaries and having a good quarterback room in general. When you think about it, Kenny Pickett is still on his rookie contract. Russell Wilson signing for $1.2 million, and those are the only quarterbacks that are going to be under contract within the next coming days for the Steelers. That can be a big advantage, as we talked about in other episodes. We'll see what the Steelers do in free agency moving forward, but when you've got that kind of money invested in the quarterback room and you can still get a good amount of production out of that quarterback room on the cheap, if you will, that's a huge advantage in the NFL, obviously. The other thing, quarterback depth in general. I actually, let me get to the comments real quick. I see his biggest problem is he holds onto the ball for way too long, and I totally agree with that. I was watching some of his games from last year, and there are times where he's continuously just scanning the field, and that's probably why Sean Payton got so frustrated and ultimately let go of him. So he's got to get better at that. But again, quarterback depth. Last year, only a quarter of the league saw its original starter from week one play and start every game throughout the regular season. So, you bring Russell Wilson in, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to play all 17 games. We don't know what can happen. And in my opinion, to answer my own comment that I put earlier, I do believe there's going to be a quarterback competition. Knowing Mike Tomlin and knowing his tendencies, that's my gut feeling. Now, Russell Wilson's going to be the leader in the clubhouse, but I think come June, come July, that's what we're going to be hearing in terms of the buzz surrounding Pittsburgh. So I want to get to the second big free agent signing, and that's going to be Kirk Cousins to the Falcons. So I really think the Falcons got Matt Ryan back in a way. It's the Matt Ryan version is Kirk Cousins. They become relevant and viable again. And going back to the Steelers, that's a good way to operate in the NFL. Yes, you need a lot of things to go your way in the playoffs to get to the Super Bowl, but we saw the Falcons with Matt Ryan get to the Super Bowl when they had Kyle Shanahan as a play caller, when they had Julio Jones, when they had the right pieces around Matt Ryan. So they become viable again. And the Falcons, again, I said it in the last episode, they have a sneaky good offensive line. Kirk Cousins coming off of that Achilles injury, that's going to be vital. So that's my big takeaway for Kirk Cousins signing with the Falcons. I think it's a decent move for the Falcons. I mean, what are they going to do? They're drafting at the 8th spot. They've been in quarterback chaos, if you will, for the past 5 years since Matt Ryan retired. I think they're just looking for stability at that position again. And I think they get it here with Kirk Cousins, who I really have as probably a top 12, maybe even top 10 quarterback in the league right now. And then my third story before I get to how all of this affects the NFL draft. Actually, let me get to the comments again. Better than what they've had for sure. Totally agree with that. Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke last year. For whatever reason, that didn't work out. They're better than they were last year and the previous years. And then my last thing before we get to how this affects the NFL draft, how about the Bears doing Bears things? Because, again, we were just talking about the Falcons becoming relevant again, how the Steelers have been relevant for 10 plus years. And I'm looking at the Bears and they're paying big money to cornerbacks. And although I think the safety position has improved in the NFL, they paid big money to Kevin Byard. They just paid money for a running back. Those are positions that I personally believe you should be drafting really almost on an annual basis. So, no wonder the Bears had the first pick in last year's draft and they ended up trading it. And then they had the first pick in this year's draft due to Carolina being 3-14. But I worry about whatever quarterback goes to Chicago, because think about it. When was the last time they saw success as a whole, as a franchise? It's been quite a while. And I think it's crucial for them to draft at a really high level because of the money that they're paying to positions that I don't want to say aren't premium positions, but not exactly ideal. And ultimately, how is all of this affecting the NFL draft? Because I'm looking at Justin Fields and I'm thinking, where's the market for him? The Vikings now need a quarterback. Obviously, the Broncos need a quarterback. In the AFC alone, I just hit on one of the teams, the Patriots, Broncos, and Raiders. And then the NFC, the Bears, Commanders, Vikings. Maybe the Seahawks, probably not. And to me, my biggest takeaway is I think the Giants are really the X factor in all of this as they sit at the 6th pick right now. There have been rumors that they want to move up and get a quarterback. So I think they can throw a wrench into the whole thing. I could see New England looking at themselves and saying, well, we really need to rebuild this roster through and through. So maybe it's not in our best interest to get a quarterback and put him into a bad situation. So that's where we're at the moment. And I have, there's the top 3 quarterbacks, obviously, in the draft class between Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May. That's the perceived top 3 that everyone has been talking about. I've got a sleeper in the next tier of quarterbacks between J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, and Michael Penix. I think one of those guys has a great chance at seeing a lot of success in the NFL, of course, barring the landing spot. And it'll be interesting to see which of those teams I just named between the Patriots, Broncos, Raiders, Bears, Commanders, and Vikings. Those are the 6 teams we're really looking at this moment. Probably not the Bears, probably not the Commanders, maybe the 4 teams between the Vikings, Patriots, Broncos, and Raiders. Who's going to land my sleeper in that 2nd tier of quarterbacks? And I want to reveal that later on this week, as I'm going to continue to deep dive into the draft as we've touched on it today. So thank you guys so much for joining me, and stay tuned as we go throughout the rest of the week and look at the rest of the free agency signings. Thanks again, and stay tuned.